So thanks everybody for coming. We're really excited. We've got some really interesting speakers here today. Before we get started, I wanted to just give a couple quick program updates. So some exciting things have happened in our graduate program here. So as of earlier this week, we have become the Technology, Cybersecurity, and Policy program. This is a rebranding of what was and continues to be the awesome Interdisciplinary Telecom program. The Interdisciplinary Telecom Program, or ITP, is now officially Technology, Cybersecurity, and Policy. We're going to be doing a ton of great stuff on cybersecurity. As Jim Curry is on travel today, or Jim would be telling you, we're all about technology, cybersecurity, and policy. The three of those combined are really the core of the program. That's the core of what you're going to need as you go out into the workforce. Whether you're doing cybersecurity work, whether you're doing telecommunications, whether you're doing networking, whether you're doing the policy piece, you need to have a solid understanding of all three, and that's what hopefully our program is bringing to you. But I'm the boring part, right? So I wanted to get across that everybody's got TCP. If you at your table, you've got some swag. As the cybersecurity guy, if you don't have a camera cover on your laptop, you need a camera cover on your laptop. Right, and take one of the cybersecurity courses, and you'll understand why you need a camera cover on your laptop. Right, we got some free camera covers for your laptop with our cool little TCP logo. We've got some other swag in the back, but we're excited to make the change in the program. So let me kind of get out of the way, and I'm first going to pass it over to one of our new instructors, Lisa Christian, who's been doing an amazing job with our new Business of FinTech course and has been instrumental in arranging this talk. So Lisa, let me pass it over to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dan. And congratulations to Dan as the head of our department on getting this new, very forward-thinking technology, cybersecurity, and policy program in place. Now I get the honor of introducing our speakers today. And there are leaders from the Colorado Department, or the Colorado Department of State. First, I want to tell you about Rich Schliep, who's standing over here. He'll be leading the bulk of the discussion. Rich is no stranger to hard work. So I'm going to tell you about what he does, but how he does it is really important too. And I hope you'll take some of that away with you today when you think about really learning the nuts and bolts of what you do. But then think about, how you're going to do it and how you're going to be a leader in the future. And Rich is one of the best examples we have in the state of Colorado. Rich handles his work with teamwork, a sense of community, and a dedication to his mission. It plays a big part in his success, which we all benefit from. And we'll learn about that today in how the Secretary of State's office defends our democracy by enabling us to have efficient, accurate elections. Rich is the Chief Technology Officer at the Colorado Department of State, and he leads the state's engineering and operations support teams, building a strong tech vision with security built from the ground up. He's responsible for supporting secure DevOps. If you don't know what that means, ask him. And these initiatives help increase visibility, they build trust, and encourage learning across the organization. With over 20 years of experience and certifications such as CISSP, Lean Six Sigma Black Belt, and more, Rich has been a network engineer and systems manager and chief information security officer. He's a member of the Denver Area InfraGuard, a partnership between businesses and the FBI. He participates in multiple groups to support urban cybersecurity initiatives, as well as the Colorado Information Security Advisory Board. So with this busy schedule, we're very thankful that he's here. However, before we introduce Rich, we have a special guest, and this is Jenna Griswold, who is the Secretary of State herself for the state of Colorado. Secretary Griswold began her term just in January of this year, so it's a new job. She spent a lifetime blazing trails. Secretary Griswold is the youngest elected Secretary of State in the United States. She's a Colorado native, graduating from Estes State Estes Park High School and was the first person in her family to attend a 4-year college, and then she went on to law school as well. She holds a BA in politics and Spanish literature from Whitman College and a JD from the University of Pennsylvania Law School. Secretary Griswold had her own law firm and practiced international and anti-corruption law and worked as a voter protection attorney where she made sure Coloradans were able to participate in our democracy. She served under Governor John Hickenlooper as the director of the governor's D.C. office, advocating on behalf of Colorado in Washington. Secretary Griswold was awarded the Watson Fellowship and a few years later, the Penn Law International Human Rights Fellowship. So she's a very accomplished person. And today we welcome her as a Hatfield Distinguished Lecturer. So please welcome Secretary Griswold. Great. How are you guys doing? Yes? How's the semester going? Bad? Come on, why? Midterms are right now? Well, you have a long life ahead of you without midterms, so that's the good thing. Just study hard. So I'm really excited to be here, and I'm honored to serve as Colorado's Secretary of State. And the Secretary of State is a statewide elected position that oversees all of our elections. I oversee campaign finance, business and charity registration, and we're trying to also enhance commerce. Now, my office, which is a great office and has one of the greatest IT teams in state government in the nation, if not the very best, is leading the way in technology that instills confidence in our elections and supports Colorado businesses. Now, it's really fun for me to see all you young people because, as you can imagine, that's not always the case in government. And one of the reasons that we really need more of you all in government and in government careers is because cyber is so important not only to everything that government agencies do, but the future of our democracy. Now, thank you for the introduction. I really appreciate it. I did grow up pretty working class up in Estes Park. And I know some of you come from all different types of backgrounds, but a little bit about my background. There were times when my family and I was on food stamps. There were times when we went to the local food bank in Estes Park. And I actually started working the summer after 7th grade to help out and just saw that so many Colorado families were in the same situation. That's what inspired me to be the first person in my family to go to a 4-year college and then off to law school because I wanted to help even the playing field. Now, that's also one of the reasons I chose public service, and it's been very rewarding. I actually started in public service serving as the D.C. office director for Governor Hickenlooper. How many of you guys are from Colorado or grew up in the last 5 years from Colorado? Okay, about not even a fourth of you. That's okay. That means this is a great university. But in 2013, we had really horrendous floods. How many people remember the floods in 2013? Okay, they were really, really bad. It's some of the worst thing I've seen in my lifetime. And it was an honor to serve in government at that time because I was able to go to D.C. and help bring back more than $1 billion of flood relief at a time that was just crucial for this community and for our entire state. So that's why it's so important to consider serving in government. Now, our office is really leading the way when it comes to IT. And Rich is going to talk to you all about that and the different types of jobs that we have in our office. And by the way, we have paid internships. So if anybody's interested in that, they're paid. But, we are leading the way. We're the first state on the IT side to implement two-factor authentication, believe it or not, for our voter registration database. We were the first state to start a statewide risk-limiting audit. And what that audit allows us to do is to verify that the vote was indeed cast correctly and we counted it correctly, which is really important. And we are the first state to require a human-readable paper trail on our voting machines. I ran for Secretary of State because I know how important it is for everybody's voice to be heard and every vote to count in Colorado. And that doesn't matter what your background is, whether you're rich or poor, whether you live in a big city or me up in a town that has more elk than people, your voice should be heard in our democracy. And I really believe in protecting our right to vote, improving transparency, and standing up to bad actors, those who would want to bend or break the rules. Now,
in Colorado, to explain a little bit about where we are in comparison to the nation, we are a national leader in voter turnout and access to the ballot. That every registered voter in Colorado receives a ballot in their mailbox shines in stark contrast to the voter suppression that we see across the nation. And Colorado holds this distinction of being one of the safest and most secure states in the nation to cast a ballot. We should be proud of the progress that we've made, but there's so much we can do to continue to build a democracy that all Coloradans can believe in. Under our current system, everyday Coloradans' voices are being drowned out by massive political spending or dark money. So Colorado can really give back power to the people to make sure that our voices, everyday people's voices, are heard in our elections. That's something I'm really excited about. And when it comes to foreign actors, look, we saw a foreign influence campaign on our elections nationwide in 2016. That included direct attacks on our elections. It included a media influence campaign and possibly the funneling of money by foreign actors to influence the outcome of elections. So it's really time to double down on our democracy. And boy, I know the power of everybody here in the room and the power that you have for doing good for our democracy. As the youngest Secretary of State in the nation, I know that the future, it really lays at your fingertips. And I know it's really easy to look at your short term. You think about midterms, you think about your boyfriend or your girlfriend and all the obstacles that you see in the short term. But long term, you're going to have obstacles, but you can do so much. You can do so much. And I would just say you should really consider investing into government. Whether that's a couple years of your career, look, you're going to have great opportunities really quick if you're in government that you can then go take to the private sector. Or whether that's your entire career. Imagine all the lives, all the people you're going to touch. Here in Colorado, across the nation, but you're also inspiring the rest of the world as to what democracy can be. And that's something really crucial, I think, at the time we're in. So I just want to say thank you for being here. Thank you for considering a career in government. And I really do believe in all of you. I know that our future really does lay at your fingertips. So you may feel that your voice isn't very loud, but your possibility is just so big, and I hope you can see it. So thank you for being here. Rich is going to talk a little bit more. He's our Chief Technology Officer at the Secretary of State's office. I hope you do consider a career in public service and possibly an internship at our office. So thank you for being here.
So I'm going to jump right into 2016 because that's on the news occasionally. Have you guys noticed that? Is it amazing it's still going on? So what did we see, as a Secretary of State's office going into 2016? Well, immediately, as we're heading into 2016, we saw script kiddies deface a website that was independent of our office, independent of the state, but it was still could possibly disenfranchise voters. So that's important to us. We not only are looking at our systems, but also other systems that are out there to make sure that they aren't misleading. So we contacted those individuals and immediately learned that, what gets hacked all the time? Let's see, a WordPress site that hasn't been patched. Come on. So that happened, and what's the solution? Well, one of the things you're going to run into in cybersecurity is if you don't have the authority over that website, what can you do? You can say, well, please take this down because it's bad, unless there's something illegal going on. And so their solution is, of course, well, we'll just restore it. And they restored it. It got hacked again the next night. Duh, because they didn't patch the vulnerability. So that's another thing you learn. So while that was happening, we also had a Yale professor that I'm sure many of you have read about that decided that it was a good time to do a social experiment to see if the Secretary of State's office would respond to people with different names and different ethnicities. Well, it's not a great time 2 weeks before the election, especially when all the counties then start reporting to you that these email experiments that are being sent out that everyone's kind of panicked about because it looks like a phishing campaign or an attack. The counties are calling up and saying, there's links in those emails that are pointed back to a malicious website. I wonder if it's related to the site that's been defaced. It wasn't. That was just rumor. And so that's an important piece to it. Don't jump to conclusions in cybersecurity. You have to make sure you have all the facts together. Then you can move forward. Next, we had hackers claim that they had breached our county elections notification system. I want to emphasize claimed. There's this great thing when a hacker posts online that they, hacked your SQL database and they post all the SQL tables, but none of those tables are actually in the database. You can pretty much call BS pretty quick. Then we had what I was most concerned about was the distributed denial of service attack. What if someone came against our systems with more traffic than what we could handle and took those systems down? We had seen multiple DDoS attacks against GitHub, Dyn, Cloudflare, Krebs. I'm sure many of those you've read about. We didn't see anything. I'm thankful for that, and now we have more protections in place. What was next? We saw voter registration databases compromised in other states. That made us all feel good. And then we saw scanning. DHS, Department of Homeland Security, affirmed that 21 states were targeted by the Russians. So what have we seen the Russians do so far? What has been their goal? Have they altered our elections? Have they changed a vote technically by hacking into a voting machine? We haven't seen that. But what have we seen? We've seen a clear desire for them to persuade us and to harden people on those views, to separate us based on what we already believe. You take an issue, and you can see it continually. We have tons of media coming at us now. They constantly are trying to separate Americans and have us forget that we have the greatest country in the world. Despite our differences, where we live and what we have in this democracy is something worth fighting for. And people going into cybersecurity, you've got to remember that. This is the best place, in my opinion. You can argue with me, you'll lose. So. Oh, sorry, I forgot. And who did we think was behind it? So, anyway. So the impact of foreign interference, we can see even recent press releases from the Department of Homeland Security, FBI, stating, but Americans should be aware that foreign actors, and Russia in particular, continue to try and influence public sentiment and voter perceptions through actions intended to sow discord. So, with all this stuff that we have coming at us, we have media from every direction. We have our phones, we have Facebook, we have news sources, Twitter, RSS feeds. How do we discern what good information is? How do you go about discerning the truth? Someone tell me how when they read an article, what kind of things do they look for, or when they listen to a news source, to tell whether that article has facts behind it? Anybody? So you look for sources. Are they backing up the facts that they're stating? Do they have sources that they reference? Anything else? Reputation. The reputation of the news source. That's a great one. Anything else? That could be a good one. Of course, I've seen bad information carried by multiple sites pretty quickly, but hopefully that goes back to the reputation of who's redistributing the information. So here's what I came up with. This is just some stuff, and I'm going to show you where I came up with it primarily. So some of the stuff you might want to consider. What's their primary source of income? Is their site driven by adware and malware that's hosted on the site? I've wanted to write a little script engine that goes out and indexes sites and says, okay, based on how much malware or adware they have on their site, this is the integrity of that site. This is how much I could trust their news. I think that would get, you could put that out there. Do they actually reference other sources? We covered that. Does the headline even represent the story, or is it just trying to mislead people from the start? And also, it's important that we remember to prevent us from separating, that we consider other viewpoints. Do you review and consider news sources covering multiple viewpoints from all sides of the issue? Because if you're going to argue your stance or your viewpoint, shouldn't you know the other side as well? I think that's an important concept. And I'm going to encourage you to read a book. There's a book, Future Crimes by Mark Goodman. And it really goes into how many of us are going to need to be concerned about privacy as we move into the cybersecurity field. Why is it when I put that flashlight app on my phone that it needs access to all my photos and all my contacts so it can turn on the little light on the back so I can see and find my car keys? That's kind of suspicious. I don't really like to give that information out, but this generation that we're headed into, we're constantly giving out information. Everything about our personal lives we hand out online when we get a phone. It's almost impossible to operate it without doing that. Of course, we have GDPR and different laws that are starting to come from Europe and other places that hopefully we're going to continue to advance. So what happened in Illinois? So this was interesting. So when the Illinois voter registration database was breached and that those records were being infiltrated, as a hacker, what do you typically try and do if you're after information and you don't want anyone to notice? Delete your logs? And you're probably pretty quiet, right? You probably don't try and let anyone know you're there. You probably move kind of slowly as you infiltrate through the network and grab the data. Is that what happened here? No. Well, for a couple weeks it did. And then whoever hacked that and was in that system said, no one's noticing us, so we're going to get really damn noisy. That's a concern. They wanted to be noticed, and we can see that by the trails that they left and the fact that they ramped up this server to 100% CPU usage. They were hammering it with database queries so fast that it had to be noticed, thankfully. So again, it goes back to that sowing the distrust. And it comes back to if an individual's voter's preferred candidate lost, he or she might feel that the election has been stolen. Even if that wasn't the case. They've won the minute you think your vote doesn't count. And that's why we have to stand in that gap. We have to ensure that the people know that their vote counts. Cybersecurity 202, voters' distrust of election security is just as powerful as an actual hack. So, as Secretary Griswold pointed out, it's very important to know the difference between the voter registration database and when you go to actually use a voting machine. Voting machines are not connected to the internet for a reason. They aren't ready to be connected to the internet. Whereas the database, sure, in some states that is connected to the internet. And it's there for a reason because you have to be able to register to vote. And for instance, Colorado, it's in real time so that you can go register to vote and vote on the same day. That's unique. So 21 states were targeted. That's kind of interesting. Why would only 21 states be targeted? Does anyone have any ideas why only 21 would be on the list? Maybe they're swing states. Nope, they weren't swing states. Any other ideas? Maybe. That could have something to do with it. Well, that wasn't the case. Anyone else? A friend of mine pointed out earlier that it could have been that they were trying to rile up certain states that had different political views. In the end, as it turned out, these are only the 21 states that actually noticed they were being hacked. They were all being scanned. So it wasn't like they were targeted. They're the only ones that noticed. In fact, Colorado wouldn't even been on the list if our cybersecurity staff hadn't self-reported that this was occurring. So where's the balance? Do we want to spread fear, uncertainty, and doubt and say everything can be hacked? Or do we want to go to the point of saying nothing's going to happen here, it's all okay, look somewhere else? Well, there's a balance. We got to be in between those two extremes. So back to more questions. This is kind of just a sideline. How many people are willing to and think we should be able to vote on the internet today? Okay, we got quite a few. Quite a few feel that. How many people feel like they are willing to give up their anonymity and let everyone know how they vote every election? So just publish it online. We had a few. I would encourage you to look at dictatorships and places around the world where it's very good for people to not know how you voted. I should say false dictatorships, false democracies. Do you feel that blockchain will provide the solution? How many people think blockchain is going to provide the solution for voting? So I'm not there yet, but I'm watching. Right now, I think we are not there considering the hacks that we've seen and where we're going, and we're advising against it currently. But we realize that we don't want to be in the dark, and we're going to be part of these solutions as we move forward. At 5 o'clock tonight, you're going to see that the city and county of Denver and Governor Polis are actually announcing that they are going to do a municipal election using blockchain, similar to what's happened in other states. So this is interesting. Does anyone know who Ron Rivest is? No one knows who Ron Rivest is? Does anyone know who RSA is? RSA? Okay, Ron is the R in RSA. He's a billionaire. He knows a little bit about cybersecurity. He knows a lot about voting. He helped us build our risk limiting audit system and the algorithms that are used in that. So what did he say? He said, best practices for internet voting are like best practices for drunk driving. That's his opinion. I'm going to pay attention. So the next thing that happened is we had a critical infrastructure designation. This was important. This provided the states with a lot of resources that we've been able to take advantage of. But at the same time, many secretaries of state kind of had a red flag to that in the fact that states have ran elections. Do we want the federal government running our elections and taking that over? Probably not. But could we use their assistance? Absolutely. At least that was Colorado's stance. So not only did DHS, which I'm going to go into some of those offerings that we took advantage of. I know we're running out of time, so I'm going a little faster. We had a ton of public offerings that came our way. We had Google offering DDoS protection. We had Cloudflare offering DDoS protection. A number of vendors offering free resources. So much to the point that I had probably 10 calls a day of saying, hey, I can secure your election. That didn't help. We also have to vet those vendors. We have to make sure their solutions are actually going to be long-term success for us and that their security is in place as well. So all those things take time, and we have to make sure we stay focused on our true goals. I'm not saying Google didn't help. They've actually helped. I'm going to go into that in a minute. So how long do you think it takes for a company to be compromised typically, according to this year's breach report from Verizon? Anybody take a guess? So I think I heard several months. I would go with seconds. So depending on whether it's low-hanging fruit or whether they're having to do reconnaissance. I imagine if it's a CIA or NSA or something, it's going to be really intense and take a lot of time, and hopefully they don't make it in. But your typical company isn't patching their servers, isn't taking care of items quick enough, and they're getting breached within minutes. Whoa. Skipping ahead and slide somehow. Well, now my next question's ruined. How long do you think it takes those companies to then detect that they've had a breach or been compromised? Months to years. So that's a problem, right? If we can be compromised in minutes or seconds, and then it takes us months to notice. Now, here's another interesting thing with a lot of the stuff in this report. You'll notice that a lot of these companies said, well, after 12 months we noticed, or that we noticed that we were compromised 12 months ago, or we noticed we were compromised 24 months ago. Well, that's odd. Why is it an even number? So this is fascinating. It's because that's when their logs disappeared. They were only keeping a year or 2 years worth of logs. So they come out and say, well, we were breached. We only have evidence for that it happened 2 years ago. It could have been 10 years ago. They don't know because they've lost their logs. So Trevor Timmons is the Chief Information Officer for the Secretary of State, and Judd is our Elections Director. They also take cybersecurity as a top priority, and they actually helped give feedback to the Harvard Kennedy School and Belfer Center to provide a guidebook for the rest of the United States on how to have a secure election. And in that, they had some key steps. Create a proactive security culture. That's important. And that's what we're here doing today, is encouraging you, our most important asset going into cybersecurity, to want to be part of this, and letting you know what we're doing. Treat elections as an interconnected system. We have to realize that all these components work together, and we have to secure them all. And we have to pay attention that we've segmented networks and other pieces properly, so that if our DMV system that's over sitting on the side gets infected, it doesn't impact elections. Have a paper vote record. I understand that that's not going to work well with the internet voting from your mobile phone. Read Future Crimes and you'll be scared to use your mobile phone. At any rate, it's not that bad, but the point is we do have to pay attention. Technology is an advantage. It doesn't need to replace everything we do. And there are times we have to realize that. It doesn't have to be a replacement. It can be an addition to make sure we're doing it right. And when it comes to something as important as our democracy, I would rather have the addition and the checks and balances in place. Use audits to show transparency and maintain trust. Implement strong passwords and two-factor authentication. Control and actively manage access. Don't leave user accounts around for years that don't need access to the system anymore. Prioritize and isolate sensitive data. Monitor, log, and backup data. Require vendors. And that's the thing I was covering earlier. If you have a billion vendors coming at you, how do you make sure that they're the vendors that are applying those good security practices? How many breaches have we seen through a third-party vendor was the back door into the keys of the kingdom? Can even say Target and the HVAC system? Building public trust and preparing for information operations. And that's why we're here today, is to put this out there. So what have we done in Colorado personally? We've had a strong relationship with the Colorado National Guard and their cybersecurity division long before 2016. I don't think there's too many states that can say that. Now that's in thanks to some great partners, some of which everyone knows here. I'll go into in a minute. We were using and had a partnership with Homeland Security long before 2016. We were using their Homeland Security Information Network portal for our elections communications years before. We had, starting in 2016, when Homeland Security offered additional scanning, we took advantage of their external vulnerability scans, even though we were already doing it. I don't know about you, when I go to the doctor and it's something that I need to know, it's really important to me, I go get a second opinion. Why not have Homeland Security and our private vendor scanning our network? It's been a huge advantage to us. We went through a 2-week risk and vulnerability assessment. They sent in, this was fun. This was one of the most fun 2 weeks I've had working for the state of Colorado. Some of the best cyber hackers to try and hack into Colorado systems for 2 weeks straight. First, they started with a spear phishing campaign trying to get our users to click on the links, which is a big deal. We'll go into that. And then they moved into trying to traverse across our network and see what systems they could penetrate. Keep that in mind, how hackers get into the network. Email, click on a link, they're in, then what do they have to do? Traverse across your network to get to the sensitive data. So that Verizon breach report that said it takes minutes to get infected, but no one notices. Well, what if, how do you notice? You make it hard for them to traverse your network. You make it true you're gonna notice them when they're trying to get to those different spots. We put in Albert sensors. So does anyone know what an Albert sensor is? So Albert sensors were offered to actually monitor our network centrally by the MSISAC across all the states, lots of different government entities. And it allows them to actually see attacks and different things that are going on and see the big picture, which allows real-time communication. That's a huge advantage. They actually came from, originally it was the Einstein project, which is what the federal government has deployed. So Albert, Einstein, state government. We've continuously done spear phishing exercises. We, as I shared earlier, implemented both Google Shield and Cloudflare for DDoS protection. And continuing to work with our partners to run tabletops and train. Colorado aims to protect the entire system as a whole, not just a piece of it. That comes back to these pieces of two-factor authentication. So if your computer is compromised because you clicked on a link, I realize there's people at all levels in this room, so some of this is pretty basic. But your computer's infected, they get your password. Well, what's going to stop them to move into other systems once they have your password? Two-factor authentication. It's huge. Not only that, we want to have complex passwords on those systems so they aren't easy to hack or get into with rainbow tables if they get into where the password database is. We want network segmentation so that we actually notice the hacker and we take this time from months down to minutes to get them off of our networks. We want advanced malware detection. So next week, anyone coming is going to be introduced to a company called Carbon Black. And that's what they do, is advanced malware detection. And they have some competitors, including CrowdStrike and Tanium. They're all really good companies that are doing some great things, and the traditional antivirus vendors are catching up. But it's what this allows us to do, which has been amazing. I used to have to go out if I thought a machine was infected, and I could isolate it from the network, and I would use all my tools, sysinternals and different pieces to look at suspicious processes. Now with advanced malware detection, first of all, they're looking at more behavior-based, but I'm actually be able to go out and look at the machine and do that forensics centrally, cloud-based, and know what's happening in real time. That's a huge difference. And I can actually look at the history of that machine and what those processes did and what they accessed. It's pretty amazing stuff. So I'd encourage you to come again next week. How are we doing on time? Okay. Another piece that we've done is we've got threat intelligence built right into our systems. So it's one thing to share intelligence across the community and then have an engineer look at it and try and, add it to your firewalls and add it to your endpoints. It's another thing if you have that intelligence and you have different trust levels set and it feeds directly into your firewalls and performs those blocks because you saw your neighbor get hacked. And it feeds directly into your advanced malware detection to stop those attacks from continuing to happen after it saw it in the first organization. Huge advantage. So what, as cybersecurity experts in the room, do you think a strong password is on a sensitive system? So you need to protect the system. Obviously, you have two-factor authentication, but you also want to have a strong password. What would you consider a strong password to be? A passphrase? And what? So describe that to me.
Not Harry Potter.
What length would you make it?
4 words.
4 words. So how many characters? 15? What'd you say? 16. I say that's a great answer. Almost. I disagree a little bit. One little caveat I would put on that is don't make it a common phrase. You want those words to be dissimilar. So the cartoon everyone always sees is accurate. Horse and staple, not connected. Put a number in the middle and a symbol on the end. Make it 15 characters or more. And I think 15 is what NIST is suggesting now for sensitive systems. And there's reasons behind that. And it has to do with how Windows combines passwords and how fast those passwords can be hacked. You want it to be more than 14 characters so it can't break it up into 2 7-character chunks. So 15 characters or more is what you're really looking for. But make it also easy to remember. What good's a password? I used to tell people, and I hate the fact that I did this, to come up with a passphrase and then use the letters of every first word in that passphrase. It sounds simple. Everyone's sitting here going, what was my phrase? How do I type that in? Way too complex and doesn't actually add any additional security. I think Tom hated that. He used to work with me. So I think we've covered quite well how these tools would help us detect a hacker that's on our network quickly so that we don't have months go by with them sitting there. So computing enhances our advantage, but public trust is critical. So we have covered auditable paper trails. We've covered risk-limiting audits. That's been a huge, Colorado's the first state to implement that, and some are getting ready to implement it in this next election. Can anyone explain a risk-limiting audit to me? Why that's an advantage? Okay, I'll do it. So risk-limiting audits allow us to compare that paper trail with the electronic record. But beyond that, we were doing that before, right? Some counties would say, oh yeah, we checked some ballots, all 5 of them out of 10,000. Does that do any good? If you're just grabbing a handful of ballots and comparing them. But at the same time, do you want to have to recount every ballot? I guarantee you humans make more errors than computers. And then you end up with this, you never have the right number. So is what you want to do, and is what Philip Stark and Ron Rivest, which I think Philip actually lives here in Boulder, and another name's slipping me, so I apologize. But mathematicians came up with the idea that statistically, if you have a close election with a certain number of ballots, this is how many ballots we would need to pool and compare with the electronic record to determine whether we had been hacked or not. That's what risk-limiting audits do. And it's a huge advantage. So we can tell you, if you have an election with 1,000 people and the race was like this, well, you're probably only going to have to pull like 3 or 4 ballots, if any, because it wasn't a close race. But if the race is neck and neck, you might have to pull a few hundred. Does that make sense? You can read more about it. We monitor our election night reporting. That is critical. If our election results are reported incorrectly, that's just as bad as the result. Well, not quite as bad. It's close to as bad as if the results were actually tampered with. We have to make sure that not only we're reporting it correctly and that it's making it to the people that are reporting it, but the news stations are reporting it correctly. So it comes back to people. What do? We make sure we have a direct access to all the media. We have direct lines to the Associated Press so we can say, hey, this was reported inaccurately. There was an issue here. This is what really happened, so they can get the word out. Because if people on election night think their vote doesn't count because someone announces all the polling places are closed and we can't say anything about it and they don't know, well, we got to fix that fast. We also, of course, do dark web monitoring, which we're continuing to improve, because we want to know when those bad guys are saying that they've compromised our databases. That's always fun, having to go out on the dark web, establish hacker credentials, and then download the database to find out it's just your public data in the first place, and they're just trying to get some extra money. But anyway. Another thing I would have you all look at, Lisa and some of the other group before this started, we were talking about how we prioritize in an organization and how we only have so much of a budget. You have to learn to focus. And you can look at all the NIST 853 policies and fall asleep. They're useful. But critical controls from the Center for Internet Security has been huge. It's allowed us to really focus on the parts that are most important to keep the attackers out first. For instance, if you don't even know what hardware is on your network, how are you going to secure it? Well, that's number one. If you don't know what software is on your network, how are you going to secure it? Number two. So some really fundamental things. I think of Michael Jordan when I think of the fundamentals and look at this slide. If you don't focus on the fundamentals, you're going to lose. And some of these fundamental principles are really what make us successful. Vulnerability management. Don't have people running their computers with administrative privileges, because then when the malware hits the system, they can execute under those privileges. And number 7, which I think might need to move up on the list, email and web browser protections, considering the attacks that we've seen, I think are critical. So here's a picture of our Security Operations Center from Election Day, and some key people that have helped us for years. So first of all, Debbie Blythe, the State Chief Information Security Officer. So just to be clear, I work for the Secretary of State, where she works for the Governor. She has established a great relationship with several cybersecurity professionals, including those at Regis University that also are working with CU. With that, we've had volunteers and people from those universities help monitor our elections weeks before the elections start. We've actually gone to the point that we train the Colorado National Guard, as well as those staff, on our election systems before Election Day. The first year we did it, we invited everyone in, we had set up all the computers in the lab, and we said, okay, we're going to defend the election. You can be the best cybersecurity expert in the world. And if you don't know how to use that logging system or that anti-malware interface, you're going to be stumbling around going, where's that button? And look like an idiot. So the key is you have to introduce those people that are going to be defending your network to your network way ahead of time. Why not give them your network schematics? Why not show them and train them how to use your security incident and event management solutions, and also look at your logs? They have to know your network in order to defend it. So that's what we've been doing. We actually invite them in, and multiple times a year, we do tabletop exercises with them to make sure we're ready. This is letting me know I need to check my son's grades so I don't forget, because he keeps not doing his homework. Sorry about that. So we've had some great partners, and it's been a great success as we've moved into these different elections. We've done multiple tabletop exercises. Practice makes perfect, and that's true with cybersecurity as well. If you don't practice ahead of time and you don't work with your partners, you're going to fumble when the real incident happens, when the real attack happens. So we continue to train. We've had 2 exercises with the Colorado National Guard and Regis University this past year. We've had the election preparedness in Colorado exercise that all but one county participated in, and we actually practiced. This was cool, and this is what the picture is over here, is we gave people different roles. We assigned someone else to be the Chief Information Security Officer. We assigned another person to be the Public Information Officer. We had people in the room that were news media. We had people in the room that were activists, and they walked around trying to cause all kinds of trouble to see how people would behave and how the different things we could learn from that exercise. It was quite fun. And they actually covered it on HBO's Vice. I didn't get to see it. I don't have HBO, but I've heard about it. So anyway, then shortly after that, Homeland Security thought, well, this is a good idea. We should do this too. So they had their own tabletop and worked with the Belfer Center to run it, and Colorado participated in that as well. The Elections Infrastructure Information Sharing and Analysis Center was formed, which is in addition to the Multi-State Information Sharing and Analysis Center. is what they do is provide all kinds of resources. They analyze threats. They send out threat bulletins specific to elections or specific to state government. They provide the Albert sensors, vulnerability management programs. So if you have time, check out CTISsecurity.org. We also started another group. So as what we found is InfraGard, Homeland Security, all the different threat groups that are out there, they have to vet the information. So when there's an attack that's happening, we report it up to them. They go through it. They vet whether we're seeing is accurate. That can be very useful, and we want vetted information. But sometimes it's really important to have information fast. So we started this group so that when local CISOs in Colorado see a threat, we can share with each other immediately at the same time we're sending that up the chain. And that way we can all work together. Faster information, even if less accurate, might be useful. Just saying. So Colorado's high-level plans moving forward, we're going to improve our technology and software advantages. We're going to continue to work on the things that I've talked about and make them even better. We're going to improve our risk-limiting audits. One of the challenges we'll have in the future is if the voting method changes. It slipped my mind. I'm going to keep going. Sorry. We're going to also improve our incident preparedness exercises and continue training. So kind of out of the general election cybersecurity realm, there's other initiatives that we need to work on. And that's why I actually moved from being the Chief Information Security Officer to being the Chief Technology Officer, as I wanted a piece of this pie. I wanted to start getting into the development side. So we have a new Chief Information Security Officer that couldn't be here today. But my new main focus, now that I've moved positions, is going to be on secure DevOps. Does anyone know what secure DevOps is? Looked at it a little bit? Okay. So the idea behind that is having your code released faster. Getting it to the point that your developers have the tools that they need, that they can develop secure code quickly, and if something gets released that does have a flaw, they can fix it fast. How often do you hear, well, we've got this vulnerability, but it's going to take us 2 years to patch it because we have to upgrade this system and then this one, and then finally we'll get to the vulnerability. That's an issue. We got to move beyond that. We got to be reacting like Microsoft and Google and those other companies that are leading the cybersecurity front. When they find a bug, do they wait to patch it for months? No, it's patched immediately. And that's where we all need to move. So that's the idea behind secure DevOps is fast flow, continuous feedback, and high trust. Building that trust between your different teams, between your operational teams, your engineers, your developers, your QA team, so they can all work smoothly and fast and provide each other with all the same tools. We're also continuing to protect and promote business in Colorado. We're one of the only states to have secure business filing where you can actually put a password in front of your business entity to protect it from business identity theft. We also are one of the few states that actually sends out notices anytime your business changes to let you know. There's several advantages to that good communication. We've also worked with OIT, the Office of Information and Technology, to integrate with MyBiz Colorado, which is a one-stop shop so that instead of having to go to the Secretary of State's office to register your business and to the tax office to get your tax ID, so on and so forth, you can go to one spot, register your business, and it takes care of it across the board. So I really appreciate your time today, and I'll open it up to questions.
When you were talking about DevOps, could you give us a sense of how progressive that is? Because in business, you don't see a ton of companies really even doing that yet, right? So that's really progressive.
It is on the edge, and it's kind of funny because originally we all thought we were behind. We were under the impression, so a good book to read, after you read Future Crimes first, is The Phoenix Project. It's a short book, and it's basically a story about an IT shop and the issues that IT shops have with pointing fingers and one guy being the solution. You always have this one guy that knows it all, but you're waiting for him to come over and help. And in that book, his name was Brent. And it really highlights a lot of we all have these same issues. We have security issues. We have resource issues. It's hard to get that top talent. That movement started with Gene Kim, who's the guy that started or was the founder of Tripwire. Is anyone familiar with Tripwire? Cybersecurity company. And he moved that practice into actually secure DevOps and writing books on that. Another good book that he wrote that follows the Phoenix Project is the DevOps Handbook, which really goes into the more technical details on how to implement DevOps. But it is fairly progressive. Now, I will say the companies in Silicon Valley, they're doing this. A lot of companies, other places are not. And everyone's kind of following suit and taking note that this is working for these other companies and that we need to catch up. So it's kind of an exciting place. Any other questions?
What do you think about zero trust?
So ultimately, that's going to be your most secure network, right? And that always sounds good, but it's very difficult to implement. That's always my dream. I mean, that's where we want to be. But in the political pressures and business pressures, that's a difficult thing to accomplish. But yeah, I never have seen anyone do it. I've seen a lot of people say they do it, and then I go in and see their network, and I'm like, kinda.
How to make sure about the integrity and availability, but how about confidentiality? How much it is important in your work?
So in my opinion, confidentiality is critical. Obviously, we want to pay attention to integrity and accessibility, but with different pieces, that's what we're worried about being put on the dark web. If we are breached and someone gets a voter registration database and they get driver's license numbers and partial social security numbers and dates of birth, that's something we do not want to ever happen. And it's extremely important. It's definitely, when you first move into cybersecurity, that's all you focus on is confidentiality, and you think that's what it's all about. And then as you move down the road, you realize that integrity and availability are just as important, just not as fancy. All right.
I've got one last one. So we got a bunch of folks who are actually kind of in the internship hunt at the moment. Is there, if there was.
Yes. So, and that's really where I wanted to leave this. So I apologize. Back to where we started. People are our most important assets. Government has been excellent for me. A place to work where when I go home at night, it means something to me. I can tell my kids what I did. They joke with me because they know I protect the elections, and they say, so you protected bingo raffle today, right? You protected bingo, because that's another thing we do. They think that's very funny. But at any rate, it is a cool thing. I love my job. And the other piece to working for the government is I get to see my kids. No, just saying. A lot of these private industry places will run you ragged, which might be good the first few years of your career, but later down the road, it's nice to have a place where you know that you're going to have an effect and you're also going to have a work-life balance. I think that's really important. But as far as the question goes, we're always wanting people, and we love to train people. My favorite thing is to get people in and teach them cybersecurity. And as Secretary Griswold pointed out, we have paid internships, which is rare. Usually they're not paid. So we do have those, and you can find that on our website to apply for internships.
Well, thank you so much. Let's thank the speaker.